For most of human history, the body was shaped by what the world refused to give. Hard ground, cold air, hunger, distance, darkness, and fatigue were not enemies in the modern sense. They were the ordinary conditions of being alive. But the strange possibility is this: hardship may not have changed us as deeply as comfort did. Once the body no longer had to meet the ground, carry weight, seek warmth, or endure long silence, something older began to fade without a sound. And if comfort protected us, what did it quietly take away? Why did comfort change the human body more than hardship ever did? Before comfort became ordinary, the human body belonged to a world that did not soften itself for human needs. The ground was not designed to receive the spine gently. The night was not lit for tired eyes. The air did not stay warm because a body was cold. Food did not appear at the height of the hand, already clean, already soft, already divided into portions. For most of the long human story, the body had to meet the world before it could rest inside it. Every day began with contact. Feet met soil, stone, mud, sand, frost, roots, slopes, and uneven paths. Hands met wood, bone, hide, fibre, water, ash, and rough surfaces that pushed back. A person did not simply move through space as a passenger. The body had to negotiate with distance, weather, texture, weight, and darkness. This does not mean ancient life was noble or easy. It was often dangerous, uncertain, and deeply costly. Many people did not survive conditions that modern life has learned to soften. Yet inside that difficult world, the human body received constant signals about what it needed to remain capable of doing. Muscles were not separate from daily life. Balance was not a skill saved for exercise. Grip was not something measured in a clinic. Heat, cold, hunger, and fatigue were not special events. They were part of the background against which the body understood itself. The first humans and their relatives did not begin in houses, chairs, beds, smooth floors, or controlled rooms. They began as animals shaped by landscapes, by group life, by movement, by the need to search, carry, watch, remember, and endure. The body was not made in isolation from the earth beneath it. It was formed through repeated contact with a living world that resisted it. A hillside asks something different from the legs than a flat floor does. A low fire asks something different from the spine than a dining table does. A child carried on the body asks something different from the shoulders than a wheeled device does. A night without artificial light asks something different from attention than a room filled with screens does. These differences may seem small when looked at one by one, but life is not shaped only by dramatic moments. It is shaped by what happens again and again, so often that no one stops to name it. The human body was once surrounded by ordinary resistance. To sit down meant lowering the whole body toward the ground. To stand up meant pushing against weight and balance. To eat often meant chewing with effort, preparing with time, or sharing what had taken energy to find. To sleep meant trusting a place that was never perfectly sealed away from sound, temperature, insects, animals, or other people. Even rest had texture. Even stillness had conditions. Comfort changed this relationship slowly, not by attacking the body, but by placing layers between the body and the world. A raised bed lifted the body away from the ground. A chair removed the need to fold deeply. A shoe separated the soul from the earth. A wall quieted the wind. A lamp weakened the rule of darkness. A tool, a container, a path, a floor, a handle, a soft surface. Each one made life safer or easier in some real way. These inventions were not mistakes. They were part of the human gift for survival. The strange question is what happens when protection becomes so complete that the body no longer receives the same old messages. Hardship forced the body to respond because there was no other choice. Comfort changes the body more quietly, by reducing the number of moments when response is required at all. In the deep beginning of human life, the world was not a background. It was a partner, a pressure, a teacher, and sometimes a threat. The body learned from it because it had to. Modern comfort has not erased that old body. It has only surrounded it with a different world, one that asks less from the feet, less from the hands, less from the spine, less from the senses, and perhaps less from forms of endurance that once felt completely ordinary. Hardship, in the earliest human world was not a special interruption of life. It was the shape of life itself. The body did not wake inside an environment that had already been adjusted for comfort. It woke inside weather, hunger, uneven ground, other bodies, living animals, sharp materials, long distances, and uncertainty. To modern ears, the word hardship can sound like an extreme event, something that arrives from outside normal life and must be overcome. But for most people in the long human past, many forms of difficulty were woven into ordinary movement. A day could require walking across irregular land, gathering fuel, carrying water, watching children, preparing food, repairing tools, responding to cold, and staying close enough to others to remain safe. None of these actions had to be heroic. They were simply the cost of remaining alive in a world where the body was still in direct conversation with the environment. This matters because the human body does not grow strong, balanced, alert, or coordinated through ideas alone. It changes through repeated signals. Bone responds to load, muscle responds to use, skin responds to contact. Balance responds to unstable surfaces. Attention responds to real uncertainty. Sleep responds to light, darkness, temperature, safety, and rhythm. The old human body was surrounded by signals from morning until night. Even when people rested, they rested in places that still asked something from posture, temperature control, hearing, smell, and awareness of others nearby. Hardship did not need to announce itself. It kept sending information to the body through the feet, the hands, the back, the jaw, the eyes, and the nervous system. A stone tool was not only an object in the hand, it was a demand placed on grip, angle, pressure, timing, and judgment. A piece of raw plant fiber, an animal hide, a branch, or a container made from natural material did not behave like a modern manufactured surface. It varied. It resisted. It required adjustment. This is one reason the human body cannot be understood only by looking at muscles or bones as separate parts. It was shaped inside a pattern of use. A foot was shaped by travel, terrain, and balance. A shoulder was shaped by reaching, throwing, lifting, carrying, and holding. The spine was shaped by standing, bending, squatting, twisting, resting low, and rising again. The jaw was shaped not only by food, but by the work food demanded before it could be swallowed. The senses were shaped by a world where darkness, firelight, animal sounds, group voices, and changing weather all carried meaning. In that older world, the origin of the body was never separate from the origin of the landscape around it. Archaeology gives only fragments of this life. It gives bones, tools, hearths, footprints, shelters, wear marks, and places where people once stopped long enough to leave traces. It does not give the full feeling of a cold morning, the weight of wet wood, the ache after a long walk, or the quiet skill of lowering the body to the ground without thought. Still, the fragments point toward a simple and widely accepted truth. Human life was built around movement, material contact, and environmental pressure for a very long time. The beginning of the human story was not a world of permanent ease. It was a world where the body learned because it had to keep answering. Hardship shaped people partly by forcing adaptation, but also by making adaptation ordinary. There was no clear line between survival and training, between daily work and bodily maintenance, between awareness and safety. The same actions that kept a fire alive, found food, carried a child, crossed a slope, or repaired a shelter also kept the body engaged with the conditions that had formed it. When comfort later expanded, it did not simply remove pain. It removed many of those ordinary signals, and the body, always economical, slowly began to adjust to a quieter world. The first paradox is that hardship often looks more powerful than comfort, because hardship is visible. It leaves marks that are easy to imagine. A hungry body looks changed. A tired body looks changed. A cold body looks changed. A body carrying weight across rough ground looks as if it is being shaped by force, and in many ways it is. Yet the deeper change does not always come from the loudest pressure. Sometimes it comes from what disappears. A life with less ground, less weight, less cold, less darkness, less chewing, less walking, and less waiting does not strike the body like a storm. It surrounds the body like a new climate. The body then begins to make small adjustments, not because it has been defeated, but because it is doing what living tissue has always done. It responds to the world it actually lives in. This is why comfort can become so powerful. It does not need to hurt. It does not need to frighten. It only needs to be repeated. A chair used every day matters more than a difficult climb done once. A soft bed used every night matters more than one night on hard earth. A smooth path crossed thousands of times can quietly replace the older demands of stones, slopes, roots, and mud. In the beginning of the human story, the body was not waiting for exercise. It was already inside a world that required movement. The ground asked for balance before anyone named balance. Distance asked for endurance before anyone measured endurance. Materials asked for grip before anyone measured strength. Darkness asked for attention before anyone studied sleep. This older world did not train the body in a formal way. It simply gave the body fewer chances to be passive. Comfort changes that relationship by allowing more of life to happen with less bodily negotiation. The hand can open a package instead of breaking, peeling, grinding, scraping, carrying, or tying. The back can lean into a surface instead of holding itself low to the ground. The feet can move across floors that are flat, dry, predictable, and almost silent. The eyes can remain awake under artificial light long after the sky has gone dark. None of this is failure. It is the success of human invention. But success can also become an environment, and an environment, if repeated long enough, becomes a quiet sculptor. Hardship shaped the human body by demanding response. Comfort shapes it by reducing the need for response. The difference is subtle, but it reaches deeply into the question of human origins. Early humans and earlier human relatives lived in bodies that had to spend energy to meet ordinary conditions. They moved through landscapes that did not separate transportation from muscle, warmth from effort, food from search, safety from attention, or rest from the earth. The body learned from the constant nearness of the world. It learned through pressure under the feet, weight in the hands, smoke in the air, changing light, seasonal scarcity, and the presence of other people who shared danger and work. Modern comfort often works by placing a buffer at each of those points. The buffer may be useful, it may be humane. It may prevent suffering that no one should romanticize, but it also changes the conversation between body and world. When a signal fades, the body does not continue as if the signal were still there. Bone does not respond strongly to loads it rarely feels. Muscle does not maintain patterns it seldom uses. Balance does not sharpen itself against surfaces that never surprise it. Attention does not live in the same way when night is never fully dark, and shelter is never fully open to the weather. The mystery is not that humans sought comfort. Almost every living being, when given the chance, avoids unnecessary cost. The mystery is that humans became so good at creating comfort that the body began living inside conditions very different from those that first shaped it. Hardship was often brief, sharp, and unavoidable. Comfort became broad, gentle, and continuous. It moved into sleep, food, posture, work, travel, temperature, light, and childhood. It did not announce a revolution. It became the room, the floor, the chair, the shoe, the screen, the road, the bed, and the warmed air. A body built from an ancient conversation with earth, weather, hunger, distance, and darkness now spends much of its life hearing a softer language. And perhaps that is why the question is not whether comfort is good or bad, but why a gentle world can sometimes change an ancient body more deeply than a harsh one. One of the first comforts to disappear from memory is the ground itself. Not the ground as an idea, not the ground seen through a window, not the ground crossed quickly between one building and another, but the ground as a daily surface for living. For early humans and for many people across much of history, the earth was not only something under the feet, it was where bodies sat, worked, waited, rested, ate, repaired tools, cared for children, watched fire, and slept when no raised surface was available. To live close to the ground meant that the body moved through shapes modern life often avoids. Hips folded deeply, knees bent fully, ankles adjusted under weight, the spine rounded, straightened, twisted, and leaned without a chair deciding the angle. A person could lower the whole body down, stay there, shift position, and rise again many times in a day. These movements were not performed as exercise. They were not separated from life and given a name. They belonged to the simple fact of being a human body in a world without furniture at every moment. Around a fire, near a shelter, beside a stream, under a tree, or on the floor of an early dwelling, rest often meant entering a low posture. The body might squat, kneel, sit cross-legged, sit with one leg folded, lean on one hand, or lie on one side. No single posture should be imagined as universal, because human groups lived in many climates and landscapes, and the archaeological record cannot preserve every gesture. But it is reasonable to say that before the spread of raised chairs, high beds, flat floors, and fixed indoor arrangements, people met the ground far more directly than many modern bodies do. This matters because the ground asks questions that furniture answers for us before we feel them. How far can the hips fold? How easily can the ankles bend? How does the back organize itself without a backrest? How does the hand help the body rise? How does balance return when the body moves from low to high? These questions were once hidden inside ordinary life. A body did not need a special time to practice them. It encountered them when tending fire, preparing food, shaping materials, resting during travel, listening to others, or sleeping close to family and group members. The origin of the human body lies in this kind of repeated negotiation. It was not formed in stillness on soft furniture, but in constant small transitions between standing, walking, carrying, crouching, sitting low, turning, reaching, and rising. Even early shelters did not erase this relationship. A cave floor, a hide on earth, packed soil, plant bedding, stone, sand, snow-covered ground, or wooden platform all carried different demands. Some softened the world a little, and that softening was valuable. Human beings have always tried to make rest safer and warmer, but there is a difference between softening the ground and removing the ground from daily movement. A raised chair changes the path of the body. Instead of lowering through a full range, the hips descend only part way. Instead of the ankles folding under the body, the feet often stay flat and passive. Instead of the hand assisting balance, the backrest and armrest may do the work. A bed changes another path. Instead of rising from a low surface, the body slides from height to floor with less demand from the legs and trunk. None of this is harmful by itself, and none of it makes a person weak in a simple or moral sense. Comfort is not a villain. It is a human invention that reduced pain, protected older bodies, helped the injured, and made rest more secure. Yet when the ground is no longer part of daily life, the body loses a quiet teacher. It receives fewer reminders from depth, weight, angle, pressure, and balance. The change is so ordinary that it barely feels historical. A room with chairs looks normal. A bed lifted from the floor looks normal. A table at sitting height looks normal. But behind that normal scene is a long shift away from one of the oldest relationships in human life. The relationship between the body and the earth beneath it. The ancient body did not need to love the ground. It simply had to answer it. Modern comfort often allows the body to stop answering, and over time, that silence becomes one of the deepest ways comfort begins to reshape us. A chair seems too ordinary to be historical. It waits in a room, silent and useful, and the body lowers onto it without much thought. Yet a chair changes the path of human movement more than it first appears. It decides the height of rest. It decides how far the hips must bend. It decides how much the ankles need to fold. It decides whether the spine must organize itself alone, or whether a backrest will hold some of the work. When chairs, raised beds, flat floors, tables, benches, and later sofas became common parts of daily life, they did not only make people more comfortable, they also redrew the small map of ordinary posture. In a world closer to the ground, the body had many ways to rest. It could squat near a fire, kneel beside food preparation, sit with the legs folded, crouch to repair something, lean against a rock or tree, lie on a hide, or shift from one low position to another as the ground, the task, and fatigue required. The important point is not that one ancient posture was perfect. Human groups were varied, and no single resting position can represent all people across all places. The important point is that the body regularly travelled through depth. It moved from standing to low positions and back again. It folded, adjusted, supported itself, and changed shape in response to the surface beneath it. That repeated travel mattered. The hips were not asked only to bend to the angle of a chair. The knees were not protected from deep flexion every day. The ankles were not always held in the same predictable relationship to the floor. The hands sometimes helped the body rise, and the trunk had to steady itself without padded support. In the deep origin of human movement, posture was not a fixed arrangement chosen by furniture. It was a living response to ground, task, weather, social life, and available materials. A person resting near a fire might sit low to conserve warmth, shift closer or farther from smoke, reach for fuel, turn toward a voice, or rise quickly if needed. A person working with stone, hide, plant fibers, or food might spend time crouched, leaning, kneeling, or half standing. These movements were small, but they formed a pattern repeated through countless days. Comfort changed that pattern by making rest more standardized. The modern chair is efficient because it allows the body to stop at a middle height. It saves effort. It gives a predictable surface. It supports the pelvis, the back, sometimes the arms, and sometimes the head. A bed does something similar at night. It lifts sleep away from dampness, insects, cold ground, hard stone, and dirt. These are real gains. No honest history of comfort should pretend that sleeping on the ground was always better, or that low postures were always easy for every body. Age, injury, illness, pregnancy, and exhaustion have always made comfort valuable. The problem is not that furniture exists. The deeper question is what happens when furniture becomes the main teacher of posture. A body that rarely sits low receives fewer invitations to maintain the ability to sit low. A body that rarely rises from the ground receives fewer reminders of how many muscles and joints cooperate in that simple act. A body that spends long hours held by a chair may remain still in a way that looks restful, while some older forms of movement quietly fall out of daily use. This is one of the calmest ways comfort changes the human body. It does not need to break anything. It only needs to remove variety. The world becomes flatter, higher, softer, and more predictable. The ground is still there, but it no longer shapes the day in the same way. For early humans, and for many traditional ways of living much closer to the earth, rest and movement were not separate categories. Rest could still involve balance. Work could still involve folded joints. Waiting could still involve shifting weight. Listening could still involve squatting by a fire or sitting on a surface that did not fully support the body. Modern comfort gives rest a more passive shape. It allows the body to be placed, rather than continually arranged. Over years, the difference can become visible not as a single injury or a single weakness, but as a narrowing of what feels normal. The deep squat feels strange. The floor feels far away. Rising without support feels harder than it should. The body may still contain the old possibilities, but it no longer meets them often enough to remember them easily. In that quiet forgetting, the disappearance of the ground becomes more than a change in furniture. It becomes one of the first signs that comfort has entered the body itself. Comfort rarely changes the body by one dramatic event. It changes the body through subtraction. One day without sitting on the ground means almost nothing. One day without rising from a low posture means almost nothing. One day with the back supported, the hips held at chair height, the knees bent only halfway, and the feet resting on a flat floor is not a catastrophe. The body is flexible enough to accept it, but the human body does not only listen to intensity, it listens to repetition. What is repeated becomes familiar. What is not repeated becomes distant. Over time, the missing movement can become as important as the movement that remains. This is why the disappearance of the ground is such a quiet example of comfort's power. No one announces that the body is leaving an older world. No one marks the day when the floor becomes something only children sit on, or when adults begin to feel that lowering themselves fully to the earth is awkward, childish, dirty, painful, or unnecessary. The shift happens inside ordinary rooms. The chair is waiting before the body needs to decide. The bed is already raised. The table sets the height of the hands. The sofa receives the back. The smooth floor asks almost nothing from the foot. Slowly, the body stops visiting certain shapes. The deep bend of the hip becomes rare. The full folding of the knee becomes unusual. The ankle no longer has to close under body weight. The trunk no longer has to balance as often without support. Even the hands are used less often to help the body descend and rise. In an older human world, these movements were not a program of health. They were hidden inside work, rest, waiting, eating, tending fire, carrying small objects, caring for others, and moving across places without furniture. A person did not need to think about mobility, because life itself still contained many of the movements that maintained it. This is one of the central differences between hardship and comfort. Hardship demanded action by making the world harder to pass through. Comfort removes action by making the world easier before the body reaches it. The result may feel like freedom, and in many ways it is. A raised surface can protect an old body, a chair can help a tired body, a bed can spare the body from cold, dampness, insects and hard stone. These comforts are not failures of civilization. They are part of why human beings survived, recovered, cared for the weak, and built longer lives. Yet a comfort that helps the body once can also teach the body a new normal when it appears every day. The ancient relationship with the ground did not vanish because people made one invention. It faded because the whole environment slowly changed its height. Rooms rose upward from the earth. Work moved onto tables. Rest moved onto seats. Sleep moved onto beds. Travel moved onto wheels and roads. Later, screens and indoor routines reduced even more of the small bending, turning, reaching, and rising that once belonged to the day. The body, still carrying an evolutionary history much older than these arrangements, responded with economy. Living tissue does not maintain unused capacity without reason. It keeps what the environment asks for often. It lets other possibilities become less accessible. This is not a moral judgment. It is a biological pattern. A body that rarely meets the ground may begin to experience the ground as a foreign place. A posture, once ordinary across many human lives, can begin to feel like an unusual demand. The distance from standing to the floor feels longer. The act of getting up feels heavier. The floor seems less like a resting place and more like a place one has fallen. That change carries a deep historical meaning. It suggests that comfort can reshape the body not by adding pain, but by removing reminders of what the body was once asked to do. The earth beneath us has not disappeared. It is still under every building, every road, every floor, and every bed. But for many modern bodies, it has become hidden beneath layers of design. The old body still lives inside us, but it is often kept just above the ground, close enough to remember it, yet far enough to begin forgetting. The foot is one of the quietest records of human origin. It carries the memory of distance, not as a story, but as structure. Long before roads became smooth, before floors became flat, before shoes became thick enough to hide the ground, the human foot had to read the earth with every step. It did not only carry the body forward, it listened. A soft patch of soil, a loose stone, a wet slope, a root hidden under leaves, a sharp edge of rock, warm sand, cold mud, dry grass, river gravel, and frozen ground all asked for small decisions. The toes spread or gripped, the arch adjusted, the ankle corrected the angle, the calf and hip changed their force. The whole body received information from below and answered before thought had time to form words. Walking was not simply transportation. It was a conversation between the nervous system and a changing surface. In the long beginning of human life, this conversation mattered because survival was tied to movement across real land. Early humans and earlier human relatives were not moving across a designed world. They crossed open ground, woodland, river edges, rocky places, wet places, and seasonal landscapes that changed under the same feet. No single environment can stand for all of human evolution, and it would be false to imagine one perfect ancient terrain. But the larger pattern is clear enough. The human body was shaped in places where the ground was varied, and the foot was part of how the body knew where it was. A foot touching irregular earth receives more than pressure. It receives warning, balance, temperature, texture, and direction. The sole is not just a pad, it is a sensory surface. The toes are not only small endings of the body, they help stabilize and guide weight. The ankle is not only a hinge, It is a flexible negotiator between the uneven world and the upright body above it. This is one reason the human foot feels so ordinary until its ordinary work is removed. When the ground is alive with differences, the foot is constantly invited to respond. When the ground becomes flat, predictable, and buffered, many of those invitations become rare. Shoes are among the oldest and most understandable forms of comfort. Protection for the feet is not a modern mistake. In cold climates, hot deserts, thorny landscapes, sharp stone, wet ground, and long travel, some form of foot covering could protect skin, reduce injury, and allow people to move where bare feet would suffer. Human beings have always used intelligence to place a layer between the body and danger, yet every layer also changes information. A thin covering may protect without fully silencing the ground. A thick, stiff, cushioned sole can make the earth feel farther away. The body still walks, but the conversation becomes quieter. The foot no longer feels every small angle. The toes may not need to spread as much. The arch may receive less variation. The ankle may be asked to solve fewer surprises. A smooth indoor floor adds another layer of quiet. A paved road adds another. A vehicle adds another. In this way, comfort does not remove the foot from life all at once. It slowly narrows the kind of world the foot is allowed to know. The ancient body was not built with the idea that the foot would spend most of its life on level manufactured surfaces. It was built through countless steps in places where each surface carried its own message. A slope teaches the calf differently from a hallway. Gravel teaches balance differently from carpet. Wet clay teaches caution differently from polished tile. A forest path teaches the eyes and feet to cooperate in a way a straight sidewalk rarely demands. These are small lessons, but small lessons repeated across a lifetime become part of the body's competence. The foot does not need drama to stay awake. It needs variation. Modern comfort often gives safety by removing variation. That safety is real, and for many people it is necessary, but the price may be a gradual fading of an older sensitivity. The ground becomes less something the body reads, and more something hidden beneath design. The foot still belongs to an ancient walking animal, but it may now live inside a world where the messages from below arrive softened, simplified, and delayed. In that quiet distance between soul and earth, comfort begins to change not only how humans move, but how much of the old landscape the body is still allowed to remember. A protected foot is a reasonable human invention. It is easy to understand why people covered the sole when the world was cold, sharp, wet, thorny, burning hot, or dangerous underfoot. A cut foot in a landscape without modern care could become more than a small inconvenience. A foot that could not travel could affect food, shelter, safety, and the ability to stay with others. So the story of shoes should not be told as if protection were foolish. Foot coverings belong to the long human habit of placing intelligence between the body and the raw world. A hide, a woven fibre, a piece of bark, a sandal, a wrapped cloth, a stitched sole. Each one says that humans learn to soften danger without removing movement completely. But the deeper question is not whether protection helped. The deeper question is what kind of information slowly disappeared as protection became thicker, smoother, and more constant. A bare or lightly covered foot receives many small messages from the ground. It feels slope, pressure, edge, texture, temperature, softness, and instability. It may tense before a stone, spread over loose soil, shorten its step on wet ground, or adjust the whole body when the surface tilts. The foot is not doing this alone. The ankle, knee, hip, spine, eyes, and inner ear are working with it. A human step is a full-body event. When the sole is heavily cushioned and the ground is flat, many of these messages are softened before the body can answer them. The person is still walking, but walking has become less varied. Modern roads and floors carry this change even further. They are among the great achievements of settled life. A flat path allows trade, travel, carts, animals, crowds, cities, and later machines. A smooth floor keeps homes cleaner, drier, and easier to organize. These surfaces are practical, not mysterious, yet they remove much of the old irregularity that once taught the foot to adapt. The ancient walking body did not meet the same angle again and again for years. It met small differences. It crossed places where the next step was not identical to the last. That variation mattered because the body learned through correction. A foot on a forest floor, a riverbank, dry grassland, volcanic stone, packed earth, or coastal sand cannot become completely passive. It must keep asking what is beneath it. A foot on a flat indoor surface can stop asking many of those questions. Comfort can therefore make the foot safer, while also making its world smaller. The shoe reduces pain from the ground. The road reduces surprise from the landscape. The floor reduces dirt, dampness, and unevenness. The vehicle reduces walking itself. Each layer has a clear human reason. Together, they create a life in which the foot may carry less weight, feel less texture, make fewer corrections, and spend more time enclosed. This does not mean every modern foot is weak, or every ancient foot was strong. People have always varied by age, work, injury, climate, culture, and chance. The archaeological record gives traces, not complete biographies, but broad human biology suggests a simple pattern. Tissues and skills are shaped by the demands they meet often. If the toes rarely spread against uneven ground, if the arch rarely adjusts to varied surfaces, if the ankle rarely solves small surprises, the body receives fewer reasons to keep those responses vivid. The change is quiet because comfort feels like relief. A soft shoe does not feel like loss. A clean floor does not feel like forgetting. A paved road does not feel like a break from human origins. Yet over a lifetime, the foot may come to know the world through a filter. It may become less a reader of earth and more a passenger above it. The old human foot evolved as part of a moving animal that crossed real landscapes under its own power. Modern comfort often asks it to live in a simplified landscape, one made safer, cleaner, and flatter. The body accepts that world because it is the only world it receives each day. And in that acceptance, a very old conversation between soul and earth grows softer. The past does not preserve every step. Most human walking vanished as soon as the foot lifted from the ground. Soft soil dried, rain erased marks, wind moved sand, rivers changed banks, and the ordinary paths of daily life disappeared beneath later seasons. Archaeology, therefore, gives only fragments, but some fragments are powerful because they show the body in motion rather than simply as bone. Fossil footprints, ancient trackways, worn paths, skeletal remains, and the traces around camps, shelters, and work areas all point toward a human story built through movement. A footprint is not only a shape in mud or ash, it is a brief record of weight meeting earth. It can show direction, speed, group movement, body size, surface condition, and sometimes the nearness of other humans or animals. It cannot tell us what a person was thinking, and it should never be made to speak beyond the evidence. But it can remind us that early human life was not lived above the world. It was pressed into it step after step. The human foot, seen through fossils and anatomy, belongs to a lineage that became deeply committed to upright walking. This does not mean every ancient person walked the same distance or moved in the same way. Climate, age, sex, injury, season, terrain, and culture all mattered. Still, the broad pattern is not doubtful. Human beings and their ancestors depended on movement across land for food, water, safety, social contact, and migration. The body was shaped inside that dependence. The foot became a structure for bearing weight, balancing over uneven surfaces, and carrying the body efficiently across distance. The arch, heel, toes, ankle, and lower leg worked together, not as separate machines, but as a living system between earth and upright posture. In that sense, the origin of the human body is written not only in skulls or tools, but also in the old problem of how to keep moving on 2 feet through a world that did not smooth itself for us. Ancient footprints found in different regions do not give one simple story, but they do show a repeated truth. Humans moved through real landscapes, sometimes alone, sometimes in groups, sometimes near water, sometimes across volcanic ash, mud, lake edges, or open ground. The ground recorded them only when conditions were rare enough to preserve the moment. Most steps left no permanent mark. That absence is important. It means the walking that shaped the body was far greater than the evidence we can see. For every preserved track, There were countless ordinary steps over stone, soil, grass, snow, sand, roots, and hard-packed earth. Bones also carry clues. The lower limbs of humans show the demands of upright locomotion. The joints, muscle attachments, and patterns of wear can suggest lives that involve movement, load, and adaptation to daily use, though they must be interpreted carefully. Wear is not a perfect diary. It cannot tell us every path walked or every burden carried, but it can support the larger picture of bodies that were used in direct contact with their environments. When this older movement world is compared with modern comfort, the difference is not only that people now wear shoes, it is that walking itself often occurs inside a designed corridor. Flat floor, paved road, marked crossing, vehicle, elevator, smooth workplace, soft home. The foot still moves, but it may move through a world stripped of much of the variation that once educated it. Comfort has not removed human walking completely. Many people still walk long distances, work on their feet, climb, carry, farm, build, and travel over difficult ground. Human life remains diverse, but in many modern settings, the most common surfaces have become predictable. The ancient foot was formed in uncertainty underfoot. The modern foot often lives with certainty below it. That change matters, because the body does not remember through nostalgia. It remembers through repeated use. If the ground rarely challenges the foot, the old responses may become quieter. If balance is rarely tested by surfaces that shift and tilt, the body may stop expecting such tests. If the soul rarely receives strong texture, the world beneath the body may become less detailed in sensation. The archaeological record cannot show the feeling of every ancient step, but it can keep us from forgetting that the human body began as a walking body, a sensing body, a body carried across earth by its own feet. Comfort changed that old relationship by protecting the soul, flattening the path, shortening distance, and finally making the ground less present in daily life. The mystery is not that humans made walking easier. The mystery is how much of the body's ancient intelligence depends on a world that is no longer allowed to touch it. The human hand did not become important only because it could make delicate tools. Its older story is broader, heavier, and closer to the whole body. A hand can shape a stone edge, but it can also pull a branch, tear plant fiber, hold a child, scrape a hide, carry meat, steady the body on uneven ground, lift a container, break open a shell, dig into soil, gather fuel, grip a spear, twist cordage, press food against a surface, and protect the face in a sudden fall. In the long beginning of human life, the hand was not a separate instrument used only for clever tasks. It was one of the main places where the body met resistance. The world came into the hand as weight, roughness, heat, cold, moisture, pressure, and texture. A piece of wood did not behave like a smooth handle. A stone did not fit the palm in the same way every time. Wet hide, dry bone, thorny plants, ash, bark, roots, shells, and fibers each demanded a different kind of grip. The fingers had to adjust. The thumb had to oppose. The wrist had to hold an angle. The forearm had to transmit force. The shoulder and back had to help. Even a small object could involve the whole body when it had to be pulled, carried, scraped, twisted, or struck. This is why the origin of the human hand cannot be reduced to intelligence alone. The hand became powerful inside a world where intelligence and physical demand were joined. Early humans and earlier human relatives did not simply think tools into existence. They had to hold materials, test them, fail with them, break them, reshape them, and use them against real surfaces. The body learned through contact. A cutting edge mattered because the hand could guide it. A fire mattered because hands could gather fuel, arrange wood, carry embers, prepare food, and protect warmth from wind. A shelter mattered because hands could bend branches, place stones, tie fibers, move skins, and repair what weather damaged. A child survived partly because hands could lift, carry, clean, feed, soothe, and keep close. These actions were not rare displays of strength. They were ordinary gestures repeated through a life. The palm became familiar with pressure. The fingers became familiar with irregular shapes. The grip did not always mean squeezing as hard as possible. Often it meant changing force carefully, holding enough, but not too much, feeling when a material was about to slip, split, tear, or break. That quiet sensitivity is one of the deepest features of the human hand. It can use power, but it can also listen. Comfort changed this relationship by making many objects easier to hold and many tasks easier to finish. A modern handle is designed to receive the hand. A button replaces a pull. A switch replaces friction. A machine replaces grinding, chopping, kneading, lifting, twisting, and carrying. A package opens with a small motion where older materials might have required force and patience. A container has a smooth grip where a natural object might have been awkward, wet, sharp, or uneven. These inventions are useful, and many of them protect people from injury and exhaustion, but they also reduce the range of demands placed on the hand. The hand still moves constantly in modern life, but much of that movement is light, repetitive, and narrow. It taps, slides, clicks, types, presses, and holds objects shaped to be convenient. The old hand met a world that resisted from many directions. The modern hand often meets a world that has been designed not to resist very much at all. Again, comfort is not an enemy. It is part of human success. The same intelligence that made stone tools also made handles, wheels, pulleys, doors, machines, and devices. But the body does not know an invention as an idea. It knows it as a change in daily signals. If the hand rarely carries weight, rarely grips irregular materials, rarely twists fibers, rarely works against friction, rarely steadies the body near the ground, and rarely feels rough natural surfaces, then the hand receives fewer reminders of its older range. The ancient hand was not only a symbol of human creativity, it was a working bridge between mind, body, and world. When comfort makes the world easier to hold, it also makes the hand hear less of what once shaped it. A modern hand often lives inside a world already shaped to forgive it. Doors have handles made to fit the palm. Bags have straps. Bottles have caps with ridges. Tools have rubber grips. Packages tear along prepared lines. Water arrives through a tap. Fire begins with a switch, a button, or a small flame that does not require searching for dry fuel and nursing heat through smoke and wind. Food comes cut, wrapped, cleaned, ground, softened, or cooked by systems the hand never sees. The hand still works, but much of its work has been narrowed into smaller gestures. It presses, taps, scrolls, clicks, signs, steers, unlocks, and lifts objects made as convenient as possible. These actions can be precise, and some of them require skill, but they are not the same range of physical conversation that older hands had with the material world. The ancient hand had to meet things that were not designed for it. A branch might be twisted, wet, uneven, or full of knots. A stone might be sharp on one side and smooth on another. A hide might resist scraping differently depending on moisture, thickness, and age. Plant fibers might break if pulled too hard, but refuse to separate if handled too gently. A container might be heavy, awkward, leaking, or hot from the fire. These materials did not offer comfort first. They asked the hand to learn force, patience, timing, and adjustment. In the long origin of human life, the hand was trained by difficulty that was not separate from survival. It learned because fuel had to be gathered, food had to be prepared, tools had to be repaired, children had to be carried, and shelters had to be maintained. Comfort later changed the hand not by removing all work, but by changing what kind of work remained. A machine can grind what the hand once ground. A blade can cut what teeth, stone, and pressure once helped separate. A cart can carry what shoulders and arms once shared. A faucet can replace the act of bringing water from a source. A stove can replace many steps of tending flame. A washing machine, a mill, a pump, a motor, a zipper, a lever, a latch, a keyboard, and a touchscreen each remove a little friction from the hand's day. Each one is useful. Each one saves time, reduces strain, protects skin, and makes life easier for people who are tired, old, injured, or simply trying to live with less burden. But when many such inventions surround the hand at once, the old variety of grip and load begins to fade. The fingers no longer have to hold as many irregular shapes. The wrist no longer has to stabilize as many difficult angles. The forearm no longer has to repeat the same slow grinding force. The shoulder no longer helps carry as often. The palm no longer reads rough material with the same frequency. The body does not protest in words. It simply updates itself according to the world it meets. A hand that rarely pulls against resistance may become less familiar with pulling. A hand that rarely carries uneven weight may become less skilled at distributing force. A hand that mostly meets screens and smooth surfaces may remain active, but active in a thin band of movement. This is not a simple story of decline. Human hands still create music, surgery, writing, craft, repair, art, farming, building, caregiving, and countless forms of skilled labor. Many modern people use their hands intensely, yet the wider direction of comfort in many societies has been toward reducing direct contact with raw materials. The hand becomes a controller of systems instead of a worker against surfaces. It guides machines instead of absorbing the full demand of the task. It presses a switch, and hidden labor happens elsewhere. In that shift, comfort becomes almost invisible. The hand feels busy, but the world has become easier to move. The ancient hand belonged to a body that had to hold the world directly. The modern hand often lives among objects that have already been softened, standardized, and prepared. The difference is quiet, but it reaches deeply into the same question. When comfort removes resistance from daily life, how much of the body's older ability remains awake, and how much begins to sleep inside us? Comfort changes the hand by making many old forms of strength unnecessary before anyone notices they are gone. A stone tool, a bundle of wood, a strip of hide, a wet cord, a heavy vessel, a digging stick, or a child held against the body all asked the hand to do more than close around an object. They asked it to coordinate with the wrist, elbow, shoulder, spine, and feet. The hand belonged to a chain of movement. It pulled while the back braced. It carried while the legs adjusted. It scraped while the trunk leaned. It twisted while the shoulder held steady. It gripped while the whole body balanced over ground that was not always flat. In the older human world, the hand rarely acted alone. It was tied to posture, movement, material, and survival. The same hand that shaped a tool might later gather fuel, prepare food, lift a sleeping child, hold a burning branch, steady the body while crouching, or carry something across uneven land. The demand was not always extreme. More often, it was steady, varied, and repeated. That is what made it powerful. The hand did not need one dramatic test to remain capable. It met countless small tests through ordinary life. Modern comfort changes this by replacing many of those tests with small emotions. The hand still moves all day, but a great deal of modern movement is light and narrow. A finger taps glass, a thumb scrolls, a few muscles repeat the same motion across a screen. A handle turns smoothly. A button starts a machine. A switch releases light. A prepared surface receives the palm without roughness. A tool is designed to reduce friction, not to teach the hand how to manage it. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is intelligence succeeding. Humans have always tried to save effort, and that ability reaches back to the earliest tools. A sharp flake, a hafted tool, a container, a cord, a needle, a basket, a grinding stone, and a controlled fire all reduce some difficulty while opening new possibilities. Comfort is not new. The difference is scale and saturation. In many modern settings, the hand is surrounded by objects made to reduce strain before strain appears. The door opens more easily. The food arrives softer. The container is lighter. The machine carries the force. The surface is smoother. The task is shortened. The old hand once met the world through resistance, but the modern hand often meets the world through interfaces. A small motion can command a hidden system. A fingertip can order food, summon transport, open information, control temperature, or begin work done by motors and distant labor. The hand becomes powerful in a new way, but less directly burdened by the material world. The body responds to this new world without judgment. It does not preserve unused patterns simply because they are ancient. If gripping irregular weight becomes rare, the hand receives fewer signals from irregular weight. If twisting fiber, carrying load, scraping surfaces, and pulling against resistance become rare, the forearm, wrist, and shoulder receive fewer reminders of those older demands. A person may still feel busy, even exhausted, because modern life asks much from attention, speed, and repetition. But the kind of demand has changed. The hand may be tired from sameness rather than strengthened by variety. It may be active without being widely challenged. In the deep origin of human life, the hand helped make the human mind visible in matter. It turned memory into tools, cooperation into shelters, fire into cooked food, and care into survival. It also carried the marks of the world back into the body. Roughness, weight, heat, cold, pressure, and uncertainty entered through the palm. Comfort began to soften those messages. It did not silence the hand completely. Human hands remain capable of astonishing craft, care, labor, art, and repair. But when daily life no longer requires many kinds of grip, pressure, and contact, the hand's older range can become less awake. The quiet truth is that comfort does not need to weaken the hand by force. It only needs to make the world easier to hold. Food is one of the deepest comforts because it enters the body so quietly. When it is already clean, soft, warm, sliced, stored, packaged, delivered, and ready to swallow, it feels as if only the meal has changed. But food was never only a substance placed into the mouth. For most of the human story, food was also a chain of actions. Before it could nourish the body, it often had to be found, recognized, gathered, dug, carried, cracked, peeled, cut, scraped, pounded, washed, cooked, guarded, shared, or chewed with patience. The body did not meet food only at the tongue. It met food through the feet that walked toward it, the eyes that searched for it, the memory that knew where it might appear, the hands that handled it, the shoulders that carried it, the jaw that broke it down, and the group that divided it. This does not mean every ancient meal was difficult in the same way. Human diets varied widely across climates, seasons, coastlines, forests, grasslands, rivers, and later farms and settlements. It would be false to imagine one simple prehistoric menu, but the wider truth is clear enough. For a very long time, eating was tied to effort before it became tied to convenience. The origin of the human body belongs to this older rhythm, where nourishment was connected to movement, skill, uncertainty, and material work. A root taken from the ground did not become food just because it was found. A nut or seed might need cracking, grinding, roasting, or soaking. Meat might require cutting, sharing, drying, or cooking. Shellfish might need opening. Fibrous plants might demand long chewing. Even when cooking softened food and made energy easier to access, the process still required firewood, tools, attention, time, and social cooperation. Food asked the body to prepare before it allowed the body to rest. The hands felt texture. The jaw met resistance. The stomach received food that had passed through a long physical story. The senses were involved before the first bite. Smell from smoke, sound from breaking shells or grinding stones, sight of color and ripeness, touch of heat, dampness, fiber, fat, bone, and ash. Modern comfort shortens this story. It does not merely give more food, it gives food with much of the bodily work already removed. Grain may arrive ground, meat may arrive cut, fruit may arrive selected, meals may arrive cooked by strangers or machines. The fire may be hidden inside a stove, an oven, an electric coil, or an industrial process far from the home. A package may preserve what seasons once limited. A refrigerator may hold what had to be eaten quickly. A spoon, fork, blender, grinder, soft loaf, smooth paste, or processed snack can reduce the work of teeth, hands, and time. These changes are major achievements. They helped feed cities, protect against spoilage, support children, elders, and sick people, and reduce the danger of hunger in many places. Comfort around food is not something to mock. Hunger was never romantic. Scarcity shaped human life with real suffering, and many people across history knew the fear of not having enough. Yet the question here is not whether convenient food is good or bad. The question is what happens to a body when the path between desire and eating becomes extremely short. In the older human world, food carried delay. It carried distance. It carried texture. It carried labor. The body learned that nourishment often came after searching, waiting, preparing, chewing, and sharing. In the modern world, food can arrive with little movement, little handling, little chewing, and little uncertainty. The body receives calories, flavor, and comfort, but fewer of the older signals that once surrounded eating. The jaw may meet less resistance. The hands may do less preparation. The feet may travel less distance. The senses may meet stronger flavor but less natural variation in texture and season. The meal becomes easier, but also more separated from the landscape that once produced it. Comfort changes the body here by turning a long encounter with the world into a short encounter with a finished product. The ancient body did not simply eat food, it passed through the world to reach it, and when that journey becomes shorter, softer, and more hidden, the body may be fed while an older pattern of effort slowly falls silent. Soft food is one of the most intimate forms of comfort because it enters the body disguised as ease. It does not look like a machine, a road, a chair, or a wall. It looks like bread that tears without effort, meat already cut, grain already milled, fruit already selected, soup already warm, paste already smooth, and meals already prepared before the hand begins to work. The mouth receives this comfort first. The jaw closes, but not always with the same demand. The teeth meet less resistance. The tongue moves food that has already been softened by cooking, grinding, blending, soaking, cutting, or long processing outside the body. This change is not small, because the mouth is not only an entrance, it is a working part of the body. Chewing involves teeth, jaw muscles, facial muscles, saliva, the tongue, the throat, and rhythm. In an older food world, the mouth often had to finish a task that began much earlier in the landscape. A tough plant, a fibrous root, a dry seed, a piece of meat, or a coarse mixture of grains and wild foods could require time and pressure before swallowing. Cooking changed this deeply, and cooking was one of the great human transformations. It made many foods safer, softer, more digestible, and easier to share. It may have reduced some of the chewing burden compared with raw diets, and it helped humans access energy in ways that shaped later human life. But even cooked food in much of the past was not the same as the soft, highly prepared, endlessly available food many people meet today. The old meal still carried texture, delay, and work. It still came from seasons, tools, fire, grinding stones, hands, teeth, and group labor. Modern food comfort often removes several of those steps at once. It can give the mouth food that is soft before the jaw has tested it, sweet or salty before the landscape has been known, and ready before hunger has passed through waiting. This does not mean soft food is wrong. Soft food helps children, elders, sick people, injured mouths, and tired bodies. It is part of care. It is part of civilization. But when softness becomes the common background of eating, the body receives a different set of signals. The jaw may be asked to do less heavy work. The teeth may meet fewer hard or fibrous textures. The muscles of chewing may be used in a narrower range. The pace of eating may change because food that requires little breakdown can be swallowed more quickly. The stomach and the rest of the digestive system still do their work, but the beginning of the process has been shortened. The origin of the human body was tied to food that had to be handled, transformed, and slowly made edible. The modern body often meets food after most of that transformation has already happened elsewhere. A factory, a kitchen device, a milling process, a blade, a grinder, a refrigerator, a package, or a delivery system may have done work that older bodies would have performed through walking, gathering, preparing, chewing, and sharing. The body is still nourished, but the path of nourishment becomes less bodily. This is where comfort changes more than the surface of life. It changes timing, it changes texture, it changes effort. It changes how long the mouth remains engaged before swallowing. It changes how much the hands do before eating. It changes how closely a meal feels connected to a place, a season, a plant, an animal, a fire, or a group. A soft modern meal can be eaten in a chair, under artificial light, with little movement, little chewing, and little awareness of where the food began. An older meal was not automatically healthier or better, and it would be dishonest to romanticize hunger, spoilage, parasites, scarcity, or food danger. The point is quieter than that. The body evolved in a world where food usually arrived through resistance before it arrived as comfort. The mouth, jaw, hands, feet, senses, and social life were all part of the same chain. When food becomes soft, quick, and separate from that chain, the body does not receive the same ancient sequence of effort before reward. It receives the reward more directly. Comfort, therefore, changes the body not only by adding softness, but by removing the long physical approach to nourishment. The meal remains, but the old journey toward the meal grows faint. The most important change in food comfort is not only what humans began to eat, it is how much of the journey toward eating disappeared. A meal can look like a simple object on a plate, but behind every meal there is a path. In an older human world, that path often passed through landscape, memory, movement, tools, fire, hands, teeth, and other people. Food had to be located in a season, taken from a place, judged as usable, carried back, protected from loss, and changed into something the body could accept. The body was not only a receiver of food, it was involved in the making of food from the beginning. This is why the story should not be reduced to a question of diet alone. Humans were not shaped only by meat, plants, roots, seeds, fruit, fish, grain, or cooked meals. They were also shaped by the effort surrounding those foods. The distance walked before eating mattered. The work of the hands mattered. The resistance of chewing mattered. The waiting mattered. The uncertainty mattered. The sharing mattered. The body learned food as a relationship with the world, not merely as fuel. In the deep origin of human life, hunger usually did not end the moment it appeared. It asked for action. Sometimes that action was short, sometimes it was long. Sometimes food was plentiful, and sometimes it was scarce. Human groups lived in many environments, so no honest account should turn the past into one simple pattern. But across that variety, eating was usually closer to the land than it is for many people today. The plant, animal, shell, seed, tuber, or grain had not been completely separated from its origin. It still carried the marks of soil, season, water, weather, heat, spoilage, danger, and labor. Comfort shortened that chain. It allowed food to arrive already transformed. This transformation began long before modern industry. Fire softened food. Tools cut and pounded. Containers stored. Grinding stones changed grain and seeds. Agriculture changed the relationship between people and plants. Settlements changed storage, sharing, and daily access. Later, roads, markets, mills, ovens, refrigeration, factories, packaging, and delivery systems extended the same direction. Each layer made food more predictable. Each layer protected people from some older difficulty, but each layer also moved some of the bodily work away from the eater. The person still eats, but more of the searching, carrying, breaking, grinding, cooking, preserving, and preparing may be done elsewhere, by someone else, by an animal, by a machine, or by a system too large to see. This is not a reason to condemn comfort. The reduction of hunger and food danger is one of the great human achievements, even if it has never been shared equally across all people. The point is more careful. When the path to food becomes shorter, the body lives inside a different pattern of signals. A short path can mean less walking, less lifting, less handling, less chewing, less waiting, and less attention to season. It can mean food becomes available even when the body has done very little to reach it. The ancient body was not morally better because it worked harder for food. It was simply living in a world where nourishment was tied to physical participation. Modern comfort separates nourishment from many of those older steps. A person can be tired without having moved far, hungry without having searched, full without having chewed much, surrounded by flavor while almost completely separated from the plant, animal, soil, water, and labor that made the meal possible. This is one of the quietest ways comfort changes the human body more than hardship. Hardship made food uncertain, and that uncertainty could be cruel. Comfort made food easier, and that ease could be protective. But when ease becomes constant, the body begins to experience food as something that arrives more directly than the world in which it evolved. The meal becomes a finished product instead of a long encounter. The hand touches less of its origin. The jaw works through less resistance. The feet travel less of the distance. The senses receive stronger signals of taste, while receiving fewer signals of place. The body is fed, but an older pattern of effort, patience, and contact has been thinned. Human beings did not simply change because food changed. They changed because the whole process around food became shorter, softer, and less bodily. And in that shortening, comfort did something hardship could not do. It did not force the body to struggle. It allowed the body to forget how much of eating once began before the first bite, before temperature became something controlled by walls, pipes, switches, blankets, fans, and machines. The human body lived closer to weather. Cold was not only an occasional discomfort. Heat was not only something kept outside by sealed rooms. Wind, rain, damp ground, snow, dry air, burning sun, shade, smoke, and night air reached the body with far fewer layers between skin and world. This does not mean early humans were helpless before climate. Human beings used fire, shelter, clothing, group warmth, timing, movement, and knowledge of place. They learned where wind was weaker, where fuel could be found, where shade lasted, and where a night might be safer. But even with these protections, the body still had to answer changing air. Warmth often had to be made, carried, protected, and shared. Coolness had to be found in shade, water, earth, or the slower rhythm of the day. In the long beginning of human life, temperature was not a background setting. It was part of the body's daily conversation with the world. A cold morning could change how people moved, how close they stayed to fire, how they arranged sleeping places, and how much fuel mattered. A hot day could change travel, work, rest, thirst, and the timing of movement. Rain could make the ground heavier, the fire harder to maintain, and the skin more exposed to chill. Wind could steal heat from the body even when the air itself was not freezing. Smoke could warm a shelter while making the eyes sting. Firelight could gather people, but it also required attention, material, and care. These conditions shaped behavior, and behavior shaped what the body repeatedly experienced. The origin of the human body is tied to this repeated negotiation with climate. Humans spread into many environments, and no single climate can represent all human history. Some groups live near coasts, some in forests, some in dry lands, some in high places, some through cold seasons, and some where heat and water shape the day more than frost did. Yet across that variety, one pattern remains important. The body often felt the environment before culture could soften it. Comfort changed this slowly by placing more reliable barriers between body and weather. A wall blocked wind, a roof slowed rain, a raised sleeping surface lifted the body from damp ground. Clothing held warmth closer to the skin. Stored fuel made fire more dependable. Later, stronger buildings, glass windows, chimneys, stoves, insulation, heating, cooling, and modern fabrics made temperature less immediate. These were not small achievements. They protected children, elders, sick people, sleeping bodies, and whole communities from dangers that had once been ordinary. A warm room in winter is not a weakness. A cool room in dangerous heat is not a failure of human nature. They are part of the same intelligence that allowed humans to survive beyond one narrow habitat. Yet comfort does something deeper when it becomes constant. It does not only protect the body from extremes, it reduces the range of temperature signals the body receives each day. The skin feels fewer natural transitions between cold morning, warming sun, hot afternoon, cooling dusk, and colder night. Sleep happens in rooms where the air may be held within a narrow band. Work happens indoors. Travel happens inside vehicles. Clothing often helps people move between controlled spaces. Hardship once forced the body to respond to climate because the climate could not be ignored. Comfort changes the body by making climate easier to ignore. And when weather reaches the skin less often, an ancient part of human experience grows quieter. The knowledge that being alive once meant feeling the world directly on the body. A controlled room is one of the most powerful inventions in human history because it makes weather feel distant. A wall does more than stand upright. It interrupts wind. A roof does more than cover a sleeping place. It changes rain from a force on the skin into a sound above the head. Clothing does more than decorate the body. It holds warmth, blocks sun, reduces injury, and lets people carry a small shelter with them. Fire does more than burn. It gathers bodies into a warmer circle and makes night less absolute. Each of these comforts began as a practical answer to danger. They did not appear because humans were weak. They appeared because humans were observant. A body that could not grow thick fur against every climate made tools, shelters, coverings, and social habits instead. In that sense, comfort was not separate from survival. It was one of the ways survival became possible. But every protection also changed what the body had to feel. A person sleeping near open air had to know the cold more directly than a person sleeping behind walls. A person wrapped in animal hide, woven fibre, or later cloth felt the night differently from bare skin in wind. A family gathered close to a fire lived inside a small pocket of human-made warmth, while the wider landscape remained cold beyond the glow. These older comforts still kept the body aware of weather. Fire could fade, fuel could run low, smoke could shift, a shelter could leak, clothing could become wet. Heat and cold still entered the day through many openings. The body remained alert to temperature because protection was never complete. Modern comfort often goes further. It does not only soften climate, it tries to stabilize it. A heated room can make winter less present. A cooled room can make dangerous heat less immediate. Insulation can hold air still. Glass can admit light while keeping wind outside. Modern blankets, mattresses, sealed buildings, and machines can create a narrow climate around the body, even when the world outside is moving through a very different season. These inventions have saved lives and reduced suffering. They help the elderly, the very young, the sick, and the exhausted. They allow work, sleep, study, care, and recovery in conditions where the body might otherwise struggle. No honest account should treat these protections as mistakes. The question is quieter. What happens when the body spends more of life inside air that has already been corrected? The skin receives fewer changes. The body may pass from bed to room to vehicle, from vehicle to workplace and back again, with only brief contact with the real temperature of the day. Morning cold may be felt for a few seconds. Afternoon heat may be crossed quickly. Rain may become something seen through glass. Wind may become a sound around the building. The ancient body began in a world where warmth required action, timing, fire, clothing, group closeness, and movement. The modern body often receives warmth as a setting. It receives coolness as a setting. The difference is not only physical, it changes. Attention. When weather matters less, people need to read it less carefully. When indoor air stays stable, the body has fewer reasons to notice small changes in light, wind, humidity, and season. Comfort becomes a layer of distance between skin and climate. The old world has not vanished, but it touches the body through filters. And through those filters, one of the oldest human lessons becomes softer. Warmth was once something people had to make together, protect carefully, and never take for granted. Comfort becomes most powerful when it stops feeling like comfort and begins to feel like the natural state of the world. A warm room does not usually feel like an invention. A cool room does not usually feel like a shield. A dry bed, a sealed wall, a thick blanket, a quiet window, and a roof that keeps rain away can feel so ordinary that the body forgets how unusual they are in the longer human story. Yet each one is a buffer. Each one stands between skin and climate. The ancient body did not live without buffers. Fire, clothing, shelter, bedding, shared sleep, and careful choice of place all softened the world long before modern machines. But those older buffers were often fragile, local, and unfinished. They had to be maintained. A fire needed fuel. A shelter needed repair. Clothing could tear or become wet. A sleeping place could still grow cold before morning. Comfort was present, but it remained close to effort. It did not erase the weather completely. Modern comfort can feel different because it can keep working while the body does very little. A heated room can hold warmth through the night. A cooled room can hold back heat while someone sleeps. A roof, wall, mattress, blanket, sealed door, and insulated window can turn weather into something distant, something heard rather than felt. This is a humane achievement. It protects life. It reduces suffering. It gives rest to bodies that would otherwise spend more energy fighting cold, heat, dampness, and wind. It allows children, elders, sick people, and exhausted people to recover with less danger from the air around them. There is no need to turn this into a story against comfort. The deeper story is about contact. When comfort becomes a constant layer, the body meets climate less often in its raw form. The skin receives fewer lessons from cold morning air, fewer warnings from wind, fewer slow changes from dusk, fewer demands from damp ground, fewer contrasts between fire, warmth, and open night. The body still regulates itself, because that is part of being alive. But the range of ordinary challenge may narrow. The old signals are called less often. In the beginning of human life, temperature was not merely something endured. It organized behavior. People moved toward warmth, away from heat, into shade, near fire, close to others, under cover, or out into open air depending on need. Weather shaped where people rested, how they traveled, when they worked, how they slept, and what they carried. It entered social life because warmth and shelter were often shared. A group around a fire was not only a scene of comfort, it was a small human answer to an enormous environment. Modern life can separate the individual body from that older shared dependence. Warmth can become private. Coolness can become private. A person can sit alone in a controlled room while outside weather barely touches the senses. The body is safer, but the ancient relationship is quieter. Comfort changes the human body more than hardship in this way. Hardship demanded responses that were obvious, while comfort removes the need for responses so gently that no one feels the loss happening. A cold night once asked for movement, closeness, fuel, covering, judgment, and patience. A controlled night may ask only for a setting to be adjusted. The body rests more easily, but it also receives fewer reminders of the world that shaped it. Climate becomes background instead of teacher. Weather becomes information instead of pressure. And the skin, which once carried so much knowledge of the air, may now spend much of life protected from the very conditions that help make the human body human. Darkness was one of the oldest boundaries around the human body. Before lamps, screens, streetlights, headlights, and glowing rooms, night was not simply a darker version of day. It was a different environment. The same place changed when sunlight left it. A path that looked clear in daylight became uncertain. A familiar tree became a shape without detail. A small sound travelled farther through quiet air. The face of another person became harder to read. The body moved more slowly, not because people were less intelligent in darkness, but because the senses had to work differently. Vision no longer ruled the world in the same way. Hearing became more important. Smell could matter more. Touch, memory, and the nearness of other people became part of safety. In the long beginning of human life, darkness was not an inconvenience solved by reaching for a switch. It was a real condition that organized behavior. It changed where people stayed, how closely they gathered, how they guarded fire, how they listened, how they slept, and how far they were willing to move. This does not mean ancient humans lived in constant terror of the night. That would be too simple and probably false. People learned night just as they learned weather, terrain, tools, animals, and seasons. They knew moonlight, starlight, firelight, shadow, shelter, and the sounds of familiar places. But knowing the night did not make it vanish. Darkness still placed limits on the body. It reduced sight. It slowed travel. It made distance less certain. It made group closeness more valuable. A body in darkness was reminded that it was not alone in the world, and also that it could not control the whole world. The origin of human life is tied to this rhythm of light and dark. For countless generations the body woke, moved, searched, worked, rested, and slept under a sky that changed on its own. Daylight expanded the world, night narrowed it. Fire created a small human circle inside that narrowing, but fire did not turn night into day. It flickered. It cast shadows. It required fuel. It made some things visible while hiding others beyond the glow. Around it, people could work a little longer, speak, eat, repair, watch, and rest. Beyond it, darkness remained. This balance mattered because the body learned time through the environment. Morning light, evening dimness, cooling air, firelight, and the quieting of movement all helped shape the rhythm of attention and rest. The body did not need a clock to know that the world had changed. It felt the change through skin, eyes, temperature, sound, and social behavior. Such signals linked sleep not only to tiredness, but to place, safety, and the presence of others nearby. Modern comfort has begun to loosen this ancient boundary. But before asking what electric light changed, it is worth staying for a moment inside the older night. It was not empty, it was full of signals. Insects, wind, animals, water, breathing, crackling fire, shifting bodies, and distant movement all belonged to it. The night trained attention differently from day. It did not ask the body to see more. It asked the body to listen more carefully, stay closer, move with more restraint, and accept that some things could not be known until morning. Comfort changes the human body by weakening such boundaries. When darkness no longer arrives fully, the body receives fewer reminders that rest was once tied to the turning of the earth, not to personal choice alone. The ancient night did not merely cover the world. It shaped how human beings gathered, waited, slept, remembered, and survived inside a darkness they could soften, but never completely remove. Light was one of the first comforts humans learned to carry into darkness. Fire came before lamps, and it changed the night without destroying it. A small flame could make faces visible, keep animals at a distance, warm hands, dry damp materials, and let people work or speak after sunset. Later, oil lamps, torches, candles, hearths, and many other forms of controlled light extended that old human circle. Each one was a triumph over the limits of darkness, but each one was also incomplete. Fire flickered, oil ran out, smoke gathered. Candles were precious in many places. A lamp lit only a small area while the rest of the world remained dark. For most of history, human-made light pushed back against night, rather than replacing it. That difference matters because the body still knew the boundary. The sky dimmed, the air cooled, work slowed, the group gathered closer, the eyes adjusted to shadow. The body received many signs that day was ending, even when fire allowed the evening to continue. In the long origin of human life, light was not unlimited. It had to be tended, fed, carried, protected from wind, and used carefully. Comfort was present, but it still required attention. Modern electric light changed that relationship in a deeper way. With a switch, darkness could be interrupted without smoke, fuel gathering, flame care, or seasonal restraint. A room could remain bright long after sunset. Streets could glow through the night. Factories, offices, stores, hospitals, and homes could continue activity at hours, once shaped more strongly by darkness. Screens later brought light even closer, placing a small artificial day directly before the eyes. This is not a story of evil light. Artificial light has protected people, extended learning, supported medical care, allowed safe travel, helped communities work, and given human beings more control over time. It is one of the clearest examples of comfort as protection, yet it also reaches deeply into the body because light is not only something humans use to see, light helps organize biological time. The body responds to brightness and darkness through systems connected with alertness, rest, hormone rhythms, temperature, and sleep timing. No honest account should claim that ancient people always slept better, or that modern people would be healthier simply by copying the past. Human sleep has always been affected by hunger, fear, cold, illness, care for children, social life, and work. But it is still reasonable to say that for most of human history, darkness placed a stronger limit on activity than it does now. Comfort changed the body by weakening that limit. The night no longer has to end the day. The eyes can keep receiving signals of brightness when the sky has already gone dark. The mind can remain engaged by work, messages, sound, and image. The body can be tired while the environment continues to speak the language of wakefulness. In the older human world, firelight softened darkness but did not fully confuse it with day. It created a smaller, warmer time. Electric light can make night look like usable space. That is its power, and also its mystery. Human beings did not only invent brighter rooms, they changed the meaning of evening. Rest became more optional. Silence became easier to postpone. The boundary between outside darkness and inner attention became thinner. A body shaped under skies that dimmed without asking now lives in rooms where brightness can be extended by choice. Comfort did not simply help humans see at night. It altered the old conversation between light, darkness, work, and sleep. And once that conversation changed, time itself began to feel less like a natural boundary and more like something humans could keep open. It is tempting to imagine that the older night gave humans a purer kind of sleep, but that would turn the past into a story too clean to be true. Ancient darkness did not remove worry, hunger, cold, pain, illness, crying children, insects, animals, or the need to remain aware of others nearby. People in the deep past were not sleeping in a perfect natural rhythm, untouched by disturbance. They were sleeping inside real conditions, and many of those conditions were difficult. The point is not that the past was better. The point is that the body once lived under a stronger boundary between day and night. Darkness arrived from the sky, not from a choice. It changed what could be done. It changed how far people could move with confidence. It changed how much detail the eyes could gather from the world. Even with fire, night remained night. A flame could make a circle of visibility, but outside that circle the larger dark still waited. This boundary gave the body a clear environmental message. The day was widening and brightening, or it was narrowing and dimming. The air was cooling. Sounds were changing. Movement around the group was slowing. The body could read these signals together. Modern comfort has softened that boundary so much that the body may receive mixed messages. The room can be bright while the sky is dark. The mind can be active while the body is tired. The eyes can face glowing images long after the landscape has disappeared into night. A person can lie in bed while still surrounded by signals of work, conversation, entertainment, memory, and urgency. This is one of the quiet ways comfort changes the body. It does not force wakefulness with danger. It invites wakefulness with usefulness, pleasure, and access. The ancient night asked people to accept limits. Modern light tells people that limits can be postponed. Again, this is not simply bad. Light at night can protect streets, guide travelers, support caregivers, help doctors, comfort the lonely, and make human life safer in countless ways. But it also changes the body's relationship with rest. Sleep becomes less tied to the world outside and more tied to discipline, schedule, and personal control. If someone cannot sleep, the darkness itself may no longer be strong enough to guide them. The old signals have been weakened by design. In human origins, rest was never only an individual act. It was connected to place, group safety, fire, temperature, sound, and the fading of light. People likely slept in many patterns across different climates and cultures, and no single ancient sleep style should be treated as universal. Still, the wider human body evolved under cycles of natural light and darkness far older than cities and screens. That ancient rhythm did not tell people what to think. It simply set a background to which the body could respond. Comfort changes that background. It makes night usable. It makes darkness optional. It makes silence easier to fill. The result is not that humans have escaped night completely, but that night now reaches the body through layers of light, glass, walls, electricity, schedules, and devices. The body remains ancient enough to notice light, yet modern life often surrounds it with brightness at the very moment it might need dimness. This is the deeper meaning of comfort in the realm of darkness. It protects the body from fear, injury, and helplessness, but it also removes an old teacher. The night once reminded humans that the world had a rhythm larger than desire. Now that rhythm can be delayed, softened, and interrupted. And when darkness no longer comes fully, the body may still grow tired, but it may not hear the ancient signal to surrender as clearly as it once did. Fatigue in the older human world had a weight that modern life can still imagine, but not always recognize. It came from distance under the feet, from loads held against the body, from cold air that made movement costly, from heat that slowed the pace, from hunger that could not be answered immediately, from nights broken by sound, weather, children, fire, and the need to remain aware. A tired body in that world was often tired because it had been in direct contact with the conditions of staying alive. The legs had carried the person across ground that was not always smooth. The hands had held fuel, food, tools, water, hides, children, or gathered materials. The back had bent, lifted, turned, and steadied itself. The eyes had searched, watched, judged distance, and followed signs in the landscape. Even rest could be incomplete, because a sleeping place might still be cold, damp, noisy, crowded, or open enough to require attention. This does not mean every day was an endless struggle, or that every ancient person lived under the same burden. Human groups were different, landscapes were different, seasons were different, and some days must have been slower than others. But the broad pattern is difficult to ignore. Much of the fatigue in early human life came from the body meeting the world with its own effort. To find food, the body often moved. To make warmth, the body often gathered fuel. To remain with others, the body kept pace. To care for children, the body carried, watched, lifted, soothed, and woke again. To cross terrain, the body solved the ground, step by step. In the deep origin of human life, tiredness was not separate from usefulness. The same actions that exhausted the body also connected it to survival, memory, cooperation, and place. A long walk was not only exercise. It could be a search for water, a movement between camps, a return from gathering, or a way to stay near animals, plants, or people. Carrying weight was not only a burden. It could mean bringing food back, keeping a child close, moving tools, or protecting fuel for the night. The body spent energy because the world still required energy before it gave safety or nourishment. This kind of fatigue had texture. It arrived in the soles after rough ground, in the shoulders after carrying, in the jaw after chewing, in the hands after gripping, in the skin after cold, in the eyes after watching through dim light. It was not always healthy, and it was not always meaningful. Sometimes it was simply harsh. Sometimes it led to injury, hunger, or loss. But it was fatigue rooted in movement, material, temperature, and social need. Modern comfort changes the meaning of tiredness by changing what the body has done before it becomes tired. A person today can be exhausted after sitting most of the day. The body can feel heavy after little walking. The mind can feel overloaded after hours of light, noise, messages, decisions, and screens. This is real fatigue, not imaginary fatigue, but it comes from a different arrangement of life. The ancient body often grew tired because it had answered the earth, weather, food, distance, and other people through physical action. The modern body may grow tired while many of those old actions have been reduced, replaced, or moved elsewhere. Comfort did not remove fatigue from human life. It changed the path by which fatigue enters the body. And that shift opens a quiet question at the center of this story. What happens when an ancient body, shaped to become tired through movement and contact, begins to grow tired inside stillness, brightness, softness, and delay? Modern fatigue can feel strange, because it often arrives without the old visible causes. A person may sit in a soft chair, under stable light, in a room protected from rain, wind, heat, and cold, and still feel deeply tired by evening. The legs may not have crossed a long distance. The hands may not have carried wood, water, tools, food, or children. The back may not have bent over a fire, a field, a shelter, or a hard surface. Yet the body can feel heavy, the eyes can burn, the head can feel crowded, and rest can feel strangely difficult to reach. This does not make modern tiredness false. It means the source of tiredness has changed. Comfort removed many older physical demands, but it did not remove demand itself. It moved demand into different places. Long stillness, repeated small motions, indoor light, constant attention, noise, schedules, screens, decisions, and the pressure to remain mentally available even when the body has barely moved. The ancient body was shaped in a world where fatigue often followed physical contact with land, material, weather, and group survival. The modern body may grow tired inside a world where the muscles are underused while the mind is overstimulated. That mismatch is one of the quietest consequences of comfort. Sitting for many hours can feel like rest, but it is not the same as recovery from natural movement. The body is supported, yet held in a narrow range. The hips stay at a fixed angle, the back may lean or collapse, the feet touch a flat floor without much information. The hands repeat small actions on a keyboard, phone, steering wheel, or tool designed to reduce force. The eyes may stare at near surfaces for long periods, receiving light and information without the wider distance of open land. The body is not struggling against cold, hunger, or rough terrain, but it is also not moving through the varied patterns that once helped organize fatigue and release. In an older human setting, tiredness often came with a kind of bodily completion. A person walked, carried, gathered, repaired, chewed, tended fire, watched others, and finally slowed as darkness, temperature, and group rhythm changed around them. That does not mean rest was easy or guaranteed, but fatigue had a closer relationship with movement and environment. Modern tiredness can arrive after a day of partial use. The mind has worked, the eyes have worked, the posture has been held. The nervous system has answered messages, sounds, lights, and interruptions. But the legs may have been waiting. The hands may have been busy without being broadly challenged. The lungs may have breathed indoor air while the body barely entered weather. The result is a different kind of exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of having met the world fully, but the exhaustion of being awake inside a world that keeps asking for attention while asking less from the whole body. Comfort does not make this simple. It gives safety, warmth, food, light, and protection, then leaves the old body inside a new pattern of strain. The human body still carries systems shaped by walking, lifting, sensing, cooling, warming, resting in darkness, and moving with others. When those systems are given stillness, brightness, repetition, and mental pressure instead, fatigue may become harder to understand. People can feel tired without feeling physically used, restless without wanting movement, and overstimulated while surrounded by softness. Hardship once made fatigue obvious. Comfort can make fatigue confusing. It hides effort inside attention, posture, and repetition, so the body becomes tired in ways that do not resemble the ancient tiredness it was built to recognize. Comfort did not end human fatigue. It changed the path by which fatigue reaches the body. This is an important difference, because comfort can make life easier while still leaving people deeply tired. A soft chair can support the back and still hold the body too long in one shape. A bright room can make work possible after sunset and still confuse the older rhythm of rest. A screen can bring knowledge, voices, images, and tasks close to the eyes and still leave the mind crowded. A machine can remove heavy labor and still leave the hands repeating small motions for hours. The body is no longer tired in the same way, but it is not free from tiredness. It has entered a different form of demand. In the older human world, fatigue often had a clearer physical story. The feet had travelled, the hands had carried, the skin had met weather, the eyes had watched distance. The body had spent itself in ways connected to food, shelter, fire, care, and movement across real ground. Modern comfort can make that story harder to read. A person may feel drained without having crossed much distance, sore without having lifted much weight, restless without wanting to move, and sleepy without being able to settle. This kind of tiredness can feel confusing, because the ancient body still expects fatigue to come from contact with the world. It expects tired legs after distance, tired hands after material work, tired skin after weather, and tired attention after real uncertainty. But comfort often changes these causes into quieter strains. The body may be still, yet the mind remains alert. The room may be soft, yet the posture remains fixed. The air may be controlled, yet the senses remain busy. The night may be safe, yet light keeps arriving. This is why comfort can change the human body more deeply than hardship in some ways. Hardship made its demands visible. Comfort hides its demands inside ease. It gives support, then quietly reduces variation. It gives light, then quietly delays darkness. It gives soft food, then quietly shortens the work of eating. It gives vehicles, then quietly shortens walking. It gives devices, then quietly keeps attention awake. The ancient body was shaped by a world where effort and recovery were often tied to natural transitions. Movement gave way to stillness. Day gave way to night. Heat faded into cold. Hunger led to searching. Work ended when light, fuel, energy, or safety placed limits around it. These limits were not always kind, and many were harsh, but they gave the body a world with boundaries. Modern comfort removes many boundaries, and when boundaries disappear, fatigue can lose its shape. The body can remain half-active for too long, neither fully used nor fully rested. It can be protected from hardship while still starved of the kinds of signals that once helped it understand when to slow down. This does not mean people should reject comfort or seek suffering. Human beings built comfort because suffering was real. Warm rooms, safer food, softer beds, artificial light, medicine, transport, and machines have saved lives and preserved dignity. The quieter lesson is that the body still carries an older memory of effort, rhythm, contact, and release. When life becomes too still, too bright, too soft, or too continuous, fatigue may not disappear. It may become harder to name. The ancient body once became tired by meeting the world directly. The modern body may become tired because the world has been made easier to meet, but harder to leave behind. A human body does not begin changing only in adulthood. It begins changing from the first years of life, when the bones are still growing, the nervous system is still learning, and ordinary movement becomes the silent teacher of what the body can expect from the world. A child does not learn balance by thinking about balance. A child learns it by wobbling, falling, rising, turning, crawling, climbing, reaching, carrying, squatting, stepping over things, and discovering where the body ends and the ground begins. In an older human world, childhood unfolded much closer to Earth. Weather, tools, animals, fire, water, plants, and other bodies. This does not mean ancient childhood was free or safe. It could be dangerous, brief, and exposed to illness, hunger, injury, cold, and loss. No honest history should romanticize that, but it is still important to notice that the young body was shaped inside a world filled with varied signals. The ground was not always smooth, the day was not always indoors, objects were not always light, soft, clean, or made for small hands. A child who moved near adults, shelters, camps, fields, paths, or workspaces would have seen and felt bodies bending, lifting, carrying, preparing, walking, waiting, and resting close to the ground. The origin of human development is tied to such gradual learning. The child's body grows through contact, not through instruction alone. A small fall teaches the hands to catch. A slope teaches the ankles to adjust. A low resting place teaches the hips and knees to fold. A branch, stone, basket, shell, piece of wood, or small container teaches the fingers that the world has weight and texture. Play is not separate from biology. It is one of the ways young bodies explore force, balance, fear, courage, pain, distance, and recovery. Comfort changes childhood by changing the environment that teaches the body before the child understands anything about the body. A soft floor is safer than rough ground. A fenced yard is safer than open terrain. A chair is easier than squatting. A stroller is easier than carrying or walking. A smooth toy is safer than a sharp natural object. An indoor room protects against cold, heat, insects, water, animals, and accident. These protections matter deeply. They reduce real dangers. They help parents and caregivers. They allow children to survive hazards that once took many young lives. Comfort around children is not a weakness of modern life. It is one of civilization's most humane achievements. Yet protection also edits experience. When the world around a child becomes flatter, softer, cleaner, safer, and more controlled, the body receives fewer chances to solve small physical problems on its own. The feet meet fewer surfaces. The hands meet fewer textures. The eyes scan fewer distances. The body climbs less, crouches less, carries less, balances less, and waits less under real sky and weather. The child may still be busy, stimulated, educated, and loved, but the body may grow inside a narrower physical language. This matters because childhood is not only preparation for later life, it is part of how the body decides what normal feels like. If low postures are rare, they feel unusual. If rough ground is rare, unevenness feels threatening. If weather is brief, the skin knows less seasonal change. If food arrives without visible effort, hunger and nourishment feel less connected to work, place, and patience. Human comfort therefore changes not only one adult body, but the starting conditions of each generation. The ancient body was shaped by children who grew into a resistant world. The modern body may begin in a world that has already softened many edges before the first step is taken. And when softness becomes the first language the body hears, comfort begins shaping humans before memory has even formed. A protected childhood is one of the clearest signs that comfort has become a moral achievement. Adults have always tried to keep children alive, but modern life can place far more protection around a young body than most earlier worlds could offer. Floors can be padded, corners can be rounded, doors can be locked. Water, fire, tools, animals, weather, and distance can be kept farther away. A child can grow in rooms where temperature is stable, food is regular, light is available, and dangerous surfaces are removed before the body ever meets them. These changes are not small. They have helped reduce real suffering. They have given children more safety, more survival, more care, and more time to learn without constant exposure to injury, hunger, cold, infection, or accident. It would be careless to treat that protection as a mistake. Ancient childhood was not a lost paradise. Many children in the past faced dangers that no parent would willingly bring back. Yet the same protection that preserves life also changes the lessons the body receives. A young body learns through repeated contact with the world around it. If the world is varied, the body learns variety. If the world is controlled, the body learns control. A child who often moves across earth, grass, slope, mud, stone, roots, and uneven paths receives different signals from a child who mostly moves across flat floors, playground surfaces, vehicles, and rooms. Neither child is simply better or worse. They are being taught by different environments. In the older human world, movement was often woven into the day before anyone called it development. Children followed, imitated, carried small things, crouched near adults, climbed low places, stepped over obstacles, balanced on irregular ground, and watched bodies working close to the earth. They learned the weight of objects, the heat of fire from a safe distance, the caution of water, the feel of weather, and the presence of other living beings. These experiences varied widely across cultures and landscapes, and no single childhood can represent all human history. But the broad idea is steady. The growing body was shaped by a world with many textures, limits, and small risks. Modern comfort often reduces those small risks in order to prevent large harm. That is understandable. But when risk is reduced, challenge can be reduced with it. The hands may meet fewer rough objects. The feet may meet fewer unpredictable surfaces. The eyes may spend more time near walls and screens than scanning distance. The body may be moved by adults, vehicles, chairs, and devices before it has many chances to move itself through space. Play may become safer, but sometimes narrower. A child can be busy without climbing much, entertained without walking far, watched closely without exploring deeply, and protected from weather so completely that cold, heat, rain, and wind become brief events rather than conditions to understand. Comfort changes the human body across generations because each generation begins from what feels normal. If the floor is always flat, uneven ground feels unusual. If chairs are everywhere, low resting becomes strange. If food is always prepared, the body sees less connection between effort and eating. If light is always available, darkness feels more like a problem than a rhythm. The ancient body did not pass its abilities forward only through genes. It passed them forward through environments, habits, tasks, and shared ways of living. When those environments change, childhood changes too. Protection remains valuable, but the body grows inside a different conversation. The first language of movement may become softer, safer, and less demanding, and that language can shape what a person later believes the body is meant to do. It would be easy to speak about modern comfort as if it simply made children weaker, but that would be too blunt, and it would miss the human reason comfort exists. Adults protect children because children are vulnerable. A young body can be harmed by cold, heat, fire, water, infection, animals, tools, falls, hunger, and distance. The history of childhood is filled with risks that modern people are right to fear. Safer rooms, cleaner water, steady food, warmer beds, medicine, supervision, and protected spaces have given many children a better chance to survive and grow. Comfort, in this sense, is not a sign of failure. It is an expression of care. The deeper question is what happens when protection becomes the whole environment a child learns from. The young body does not only inherit human evolution through bones and genes, it also inherits a world. It learns what normal ground feels like, how far a body usually moves, how often it bends, how much the hands must hold, how much weather touches the skin, how darkness arrives, how food appears, and how adults use their own bodies. In older human life, children grew near the daily work of survival. They saw people carry, gather, prepare, repair, squat, walk, rest low, tend fire, share food, and respond to changing weather. They learned by watching and by joining in small ways, slowly, imperfectly, and with variation across cultures and places. No single ancient childhood should be imagined as universal. Some children live near forests, some near coasts, some in dry lands, some in villages, some with herders, farmers, foragers, craftspeople, or families shaped by many different traditions. But across many of these lives, the body was taught by a world that had not been fully softened. Children met resistance early, often through play, imitation, and ordinary movement. They learned that ground could tilt, that objects could be heavy, that fire required distance, that weather changed plans, that food took work, and that rest did not always come from furniture. Modern comfort can change this inheritance. A child may still be loved, active, educated, and curious, but the surrounding world may ask less from the whole body. Movement can become scheduled instead of woven into life. Play can become safer but less varied. Food can arrive without visible labor. Warmth can arrive without gathering, fire, or shared closeness. Darkness can be interrupted by a switch. The body grows inside these assumptions before it has words for them. This is how comfort crosses generations. It does not only reshape adults who stop moving in old ways, it reshapes the starting point from which children learn what a body is for. A low squat may no longer feel like rest. Walking far may feel like an unusual task. Sitting still indoors may feel normal long before the body has explored many forms of balance, climbing, carrying, and weather. Again, this is not a reason to praise danger. The past was not kinder to children than the present. Many old risks were cruel and unnecessary. The value of this thought is more careful. Protection and experience are not the same thing. A protected child still needs a world rich enough to teach the body. Comfort becomes most powerful when it decides, silently, which lessons arrive and which lessons disappear. In that way, it does not merely change one lifetime. It changes what each new generation remembers through movement, through posture, through touch, through caution, through play, and through the quiet feeling of what seems ordinary. The story now returns to the quiet center of the question. Comfort changed the human body not by striking it, but by standing between the body and the world that once shaped it. The ground became farther away. The foot heard less from stone, soil, slope, mud, sand, roots, and cold earth. The hand met fewer rough materials and more objects already shaped for ease. Food arrived with less searching, less carrying, less breaking, less grinding, and often less chewing. Weather touched the skin through walls, clothing, blankets, glass, heating, and cooling. Darkness no longer ended the day as firmly as it once did. Fatigue changed its source, moving from distance, weight, cold, heat, and material work towards stillness, brightness, repetition, and mental pressure. Childhood itself began to unfold inside softer, safer, more controlled spaces. None of these changes should be described as simple decline. Many of them protected human life. Many reduced suffering that was real, common, and often severe. A bed can protect a sick body. A roof can save a child from cold rain. A shoe can prevent injury. A lamp can guide someone through danger. A soft meal can feed someone who cannot chew. A controlled room can let an old person rest through winter or heat. Comfort belongs to the human story because humans were always trying to survive with more care and less loss. But the body does not separate comfort from environment. It responds to what surrounds it every day. If life gives less ground, the body receives less ground. If life gives less carrying, the body receives less carrying. If life gives less darkness, less weather, less waiting, less distance, and less texture, the body receives fewer reasons to keep certain older responses vivid. This is the deeper pattern. Hardship shaped the body through pressure. Comfort shaped it through absence. The ancient body was formed in a world where effort was not always chosen. Movement, Posture, balance, hunger, warmth, rest, and attention were tied to landscapes and other people. A person did not need to invent a separate time to use the body, because the body was already being used by the shape of the day. The modern world often separates those things. Movement becomes something scheduled. Rest becomes something purchased. Warmth becomes a setting. Food becomes a product. Light becomes continuous. Safety becomes architectural. Time becomes flexible. The body is still human, still ancient in many of its systems, but the signals around it have changed. This is why comfort can be more transformative than hardship. Hardship leaves scars we can see. Comfort leaves spaces where old demands used to be. It makes life easier, then lets the body adapt to ease as if ease were the natural state of the world. The ground is still beneath us, but often hidden under floors. The night still arrives, but often interrupted by light. Weather still moves outside, but often touches us only briefly. Food still comes from soil, water, plants, animals, labor, and time, but the finished meal can hide that long path. The body still carries memories of an older world, yet many of those memories must now wait quietly, unused, until life calls them again. The lesson is not to hate comfort, and it is not to worship hardship. That would be too simple for the human story. Hardship caused suffering, injury, hunger, fear, and loss. Many people in the past lived with dangers that modern life has worked patiently to reduce. A safer bed, a warmer room, a cleaner wound, a softer meal, a reliable roof, and a light in darkness can be acts of care. They can protect the weak, the old, the sick, the young, and the exhausted. Human beings did not create comfort because they were foolish. They created it because life was difficult, and because intelligence made it possible to place gentler layers between the body and danger. The more useful lesson is quieter. Comfort becomes risky only when it makes us forget that the body still belongs to a much older world. The body does not become modern as quickly as the room around it changes. It still has feet shaped for contact with the ground, hands shaped for varied grip, eyes shaped by natural light and distance, skin that reads temperature, joints that expect movement, and rhythms that respond to darkness, hunger, effort, and rest. Modern life can protect those systems, but it can also underuse them. The question is not whether people should return to sleeping on cold ground, eating with constant scarcity, living without light, or suffering through weather. That would be a false lesson, and a cruel one. The question is whether a protected life can still leave enough room for the body to remember its range. A body does not need danger in order to be human. It needs signals. It needs some contact with ground, some variation in movement, some real use of hands, some honest darkness, some awareness of weather, some patience around food, some rhythm that does not belong only to machines and schedules. These are not commands. They are historical clues. They remind us that the body is not a blank object placed inside modern comfort. It is a living inheritance. It carries traces of landscapes, fires, shelters, walking paths, shared sleep, carried children, rough materials, changing seasons, and long evenings when the sky slowly took light away. To understand this is to become more gentle toward the body, not more angry at it. Many modern people feel stiff, tired, restless, distracted, or strangely separated from themselves, and the answer is not always personal failure. Sometimes the body is simply living in an environment very different from the one that taught it how to feel whole. Comfort can make life safer, while also making the body's older needs harder to hear. That is why the value of this story is not in blaming modern life, but in seeing it clearly. Civilization has saved us from many forms of hardship, and that is a real achievement. But civilization also asks us to remember what it has softened. The ground still matters. Darkness still matters. Weather still matters. Texture, effort, balance, chewing, carrying, walking, resting, and waiting still matter. Not because the past was better, but because the body was shaped before the present existed. When we understand comfort as an environment, not just a pleasure, the question becomes more careful. We can keep the protections that make life humane, while noticing the older signals that comfort has made quiet. The human body is not asking to suffer. It may only be asking not to be completely separated from the world that formed it. Perhaps the strangest part of the human story is that success can change us more deeply than struggle. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings learned how to reduce cold, shorten hunger, soften the ground, carry less weight, survive darkness, protect children, and create safer places to live. Each generation inherited not only a body, but also new solutions. A shelter became a house, a fire became a stove, a path became a road, a hide became clothing, a lamp became a city of lights, a difficult journey became a short trip, a rare meal became an ordinary one. These changes happened slowly, then rapidly, then faster still, and through each change the human body remained what it had always been, a living record of a much older world. The body did not evolve inside climate-controlled rooms. It did not emerge on flat floors. It did not begin under electric light. It did not learn movement through furniture, screens, vehicles, and packaged food. It began in contact with earth, weather, distance, darkness, effort, and other people. Yet today, many of those ancient forces reach us only after passing through layers of comfort. That comfort is one of humanity's greatest achievements. It has reduced suffering on a scale that earlier generations could barely imagine. But it has also created a new historical question. Not a question about survival, but a question about memory. The body remembers through use. It remembers through repetition. It remembers through the signals it receives every day. When those signals change, memory changes with them. The foot remembers less of the ground. The hand remembers less of rough material. The skin remembers less of weather. The eyes remember less of darkness. The body is not damaged by this in some simple way. It is adapting, just as bodies always have. The mystery is where that adaptation leads. Human beings continue to build softer environments, more efficient tools, more stable temperatures, more artificial light, more automation, and more distance from physical hardship. There is little reason to believe this process will stop. Future generations may inherit comforts that seem almost unimaginable today, just as modern life would seem unimaginable to most people who lived thousands of years ago. The question is not whether comfort will continue. The question is what kind of body will continue with it. Will future humans still recognize the signals that shaped their ancestors? Will darkness still mean the same thing when light is always available? Will distance still feel real when movement becomes easier? Will weather still influence daily life when climate can be controlled almost everywhere? Will the body continue carrying ancient memories that it no longer uses, or will those memories slowly fade into the background of human experience? No one knows the answer. History cannot see that far ahead. Archaeology can tell us where the body came from, but not exactly where it is going. What it can show is something quieter. Every generation lives between inheritance and invention. We inherit a body shaped by a long evolutionary past. We invent a world that changes the conditions of that body. The story of comfort is the story of that meeting point. It is not a story about rejecting progress. It is not a story about returning to hardship. It is a story about noticing that the most powerful forces are not always the harshest ones. Sometimes the forces that reshape us most deeply are the gentle ones. The warm room, the soft bed, the smooth floor, the bright screen, the ready meal, the protected child, the comfortable life. And as the night grows quiet and the long history of the human body settles into the background, one question remains, still unanswered. If comfort continues to change the human body generation after generation, what parts of the ancient human experience will still be recognizable thousands of years from now?